Love makes me treat you the way that I do. Gee, baby, ain't I good to you? There's nothing too good for a girl that's so true. Gee, baby, ain't I good to you? Bought you a fur coat for Christmas, a diamond ring, a Cadillac car, and everything. Love makes me treat you the way that I do. Gee, baby, ain't I good to you? Greetings, peeps. I hope everyone is doing well and enjoying some of this absolutely beautiful fall weather we've been having. The midterm is right around the corner, starting on the 22nd. This particular video is a revised lecture on major scales and key signatures, which will be part of your midterm. A little bit of a note about the midterm. Obviously, it's going to cover everything from the beginning of the semester to major scales and key signatures, and then we move on to the second portions or the second half of our semester. So let's talk just briefly about the midterm and the time limit. Understand that it does start open on the 22nd, and it goes through the 28th. You need to be aware, though, that even though you have that from Sunday to Saturday, you have that window. That's just a window for you to take the midterm. Once you start that midterm, you must finish it within that allotted 2-hour time frame. You can't start it, pause it, and then come back to it. So I urge you, think very carefully about when you're going to start it, plan it, and allow yourself time on either side just in case there might be, a power failure or something else could happen. The thing to not do, ladies and gentlemen, is to wait until 2 hours before midnight on Saturday to begin your midterm, because that's just crazy. That's just tempting fate. Anything could happen. So please give yourself time. You have the entire week for review and to prepare. Set yourself up a day. This is when you're going to take the midterm. That way, if something happens, power failure, whatever, your computer locks up, whatever, then I have time to do something about it. If you wait until 10 p.m. on Saturday night and your computer locks up, I can't help you. That's outside of the time limit. So please give yourself that time so that you can adjust if necessary. Hopefully, you won't need to. And I should also mention, it's probably not going to take you the entire 2 hours to take the midterm, but you have 2 hours if you need it. Okay, so what this vid is about is essentially major scales and key signatures, and specifically using something called the circle of fifths and the order of sharps and flats. Now, you have this tool available to you in a PDF document on our e-learning site under the module Useful Stuff or Useful Tools, I think, something like that. Anyway, you can print that up, the circle of fifths and the order of sharps and flats, and you can use it during your midterm. It may be of great help for you. If you don't need it, don't worry about it, but I should mention that that is an available tool for you. So I encourage you to watch this. It's a revised version of major scales and key signatures from a previous vid that I produced for a class actually a few years ago. So this is a little bit more updated. It uses a little bit better graphics. and a little bit better conceptualizing of what the circle of fifths is, what major scales are, and how to construct them. Your exam is going to ask you to look at scales, and it's going to ask you to provide the necessary accidentals to make the scale a major scale. And it will also provide for you key signatures with a scale and say, okay, tell us what that is. So hopefully this presentation will help you. It's in two parts. The first part introduces the circle of fifths. The second part introduces the circle of fifths in conjunction with the order of sharps and the order of flats. Both of these are great tools for you to use. So I encourage you, as always, if you have questions, don't hesitate to email me. See you soon, folks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin our study of major scales and key signatures. Before we can understand what a major scale is, we need to become familiar with what the term major refers to. In music, and more specifically in the construction of a musical scale, there is a phenomenon known as modality. Modality in music refers to the use of a specific modal or tonal scheme, modal or tonal scheme. This modality or tonal scheme determines how certain musical components, such as scales or melodies, sound. Modality can also be loosely defined as mood. In other words, the mood of a scale or melody might be major, or it could be minor. In this course, we will be focusing primarily on two modes or moods, major and minor. Now, some people have difficulty discerning the difference between major and minor sounding music. Perhaps a simple way of identifying the difference would be to classify major as happy and minor as sad. Although both modes are used in various types of music that could be classified as either happy or sad, you shouldn't really limit yourself, in other words, to making those decisions about major and minor. Major and minor modes have been used throughout history and are still used in music today. However, as you will see, the origin of these modes dates back to around the 6th century, near the time of Pope Gregorius, or Pope Gregory. He was the head of the Roman Catholic Church at that time. It was during this time that the 7 church modes were devised to standardize chant singing in the church. So let's take a look at these modes, these church modes. The first is ionic. And when we look at them and listen, that would be ionic mode. And then we have Dorian. And Phrygian. And Lydian. And Mixolydian. And finally, Aeolian. And the first two modes, Ionic and Dorian, are actually, we've got one more, Locrian. So the first two modes, Ionic and Dorian, are actually what we're focusing on as far as the modes that we're going to be talking about, major and minor. Ionic is a major mode, and Dorian is a minor mode. Now, when we talk about the construction of a major scale, it's important to remember that the previous church modes led to the idea of something called functional harmony. Harmony is a discussion we're going to have later this semester. However, the function part, well, that's something we can talk about right now, and it's directly related to the scales. Like the 7 church modes, there are 7 scale degrees, and each of them has a name. First is tonic, or the first tone of a scale. Supertonic, the second tone of a scale. Mediant, which is the third tone of the scale. And by the way, the mediant is what can make a scale major or minor. We'll talk about that more in a later discussion. And then subdominant, the fourth tone of a scale. Dominant, the fifth tone of a scale, and one of the most stable tones of a major scale. Submediant, the sixth tone. Leading tone, the seventh tone of a scale, and this is one of the most powerful tones because it pulls the ear towards tonic. Okay, so we're going to need a staff, obviously. And with the staff, we're going to need a clef symbol. So in this case, why don't we just go ahead and use the treble clef? It's probably the most familiar to many of us. And we're going to start a scale, and let's start our scale on middle C. So we're going to need a ledger line below the staff where middle C would be. And there it is. And then we need the 7 other tones to the scale, because every major scale has 8 tones. So there they are, from C to C, okay? And there you can see there are 8 of these tones. All of these tones are arranged in a sequence of whole steps and half steps. For example, there is a whole step between the first 2 pitches, and there is a whole step between the next 2 pitches, and between the 4th and 5th pitches, and between the 5th and 6th pitches, and between the 6th and 7th pitches. The other 2 steps between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8 are half steps. And so that makes up the sound of a major scale. Now, if we look at this from the standpoint of a piano keyboard, again, we see the letter names to these 8 tones, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And again, there is the whole step between the first 2, the whole step between the next 2, between the 2nd and 3rd degrees. And here is that half step between E and F. And then we have another whole step between the next 2, 4th and 5th, F and G. And then we have another whole step between G and A. And another whole step between A and B. And then finally that final half step between B and C. Now it's very important to understand that this organization of whole steps and half steps is true for any major scale. They all have this. It doesn't matter what note that you start on, it's all going to have this. So let's look at that again from the standpoint of what they are and moving the scale. Let's now start our scale on D instead of on C, and take a look at what we have here. We have whole step between D and E, and between F and G, between G and A, and between A and B, and between C and D. Now, if we leave the half steps where they were, E and F, and B and C, and we play this scale, it's not going to sound major. So if I play all of those in sequence, your ear might be saying, that doesn't sound like a major scale to me, and you would be right. In fact, we could consider this scale Dorian. It's exactly what it is, and it's exactly what it's going to sound like. Okay, so if we move those half steps to where they're supposed to be, between the 3rd and the 4th degree and the 7th and 8th degree, now we no longer have a minor scale, but we have a major scale. And we have that whole step between the first 2 pitches and between the second 2 pitches, 2nd and 3rd degree. And now, because of that F sharp, we have a half step between the 3rd and 4th degree. And then the rest would be as before. Whole step because of the C sharp. And then finally that last 2 half step between C sharp and D. So that gives us this sequence of whole steps and half steps that every single major scale must have. So understand, as long as there is a half step between the 3rd and 4th degree and a half step between the 7th and 8th degree, it must be a major scale. Now, if we think about this in terms of what your textbook is going to be asking you on your midterm, it may say, put the correct accidentals in this scale to make it a major scale. And so you would need to probably look at a piano keyboard to make that determination as to where the accidentals need to go in order to create this sequence of whole steps and half steps. Okay. And that's where they would go, between the 3rd and 4th degree and between the 7th and 8th degree. That's where the half steps would need to go. So give yourself some time to consider this and where these accidentals should be placed. Now, if we take the accidentals away, once again, we do not have a major scale. It's only when they're present that we have a major scale. But let's look at a different scale. Let's look at this scale that is going to start not on just G, but it's actually going to start on G flat. So look at that. Look at all those flats. G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat, F natural, and G flat. But that, to your ears, should sound major. And indeed it is. Now, think about this. If you were to compose a piece of music and you wanted to compose it in this tonal scheme of starting on G flat and ending on G flat, including all these notes, every time you came to a G, you'd have to put a flat symbol by it, an A, a flat symbol, a B, a flat symbol, and so on, which is rather tedious when you think about it. But that's the only way that this major tonality will work. That's the only way you're going to get a half step between the 3rd and 4th degrees and a half step between the 7th and 8th degrees, as is outlined both on the staff and in this keyboard that we have down here. But there's an easier way. We can take all of those accidentals and move them all the way over to the left, and now we have a key signature. Here is a key signature. This tells us which notes are to be flat and sharp. In other words, every time we come to a B, it's supposed to be flat. An E, flat, A, flat, D, flat, G, flat, C, flat, and so on. And so when if we play this piece the way this is written, that's exactly what we're going to hear, a major scale. Okay, so now let's take a look at constructing major scales and key signatures using a new tool called the circle of fifths and the order of sharps and flats. So this thing here, this circle, it's got letters around it and numbers around it and the flat symbol and a sharp symbol, is known as the circle of fifths. Why fifths? Well, let's take a look at that. If you start on C and you go clockwise to G, think about it, C, D, E, F, G, that's 5 tones, G to D. G, A, B, C, D, another 5, and so on. So that's why they call it this circle of fifths. Now, its use is fairly simple once you get the hang of it. So take a look at what we're going to do next. We're going to use the C major scale as we did before, but let's understand something. Notice how when we look at the top of the wheel, like we're looking at 12 o'clock noon on a clock or midnight on a clock, notice how C is related to 0. In other words, no flats or sharps. There are no accidentals in the key of C. So when we play a C major scale, just starting on middle C and working our way up, we don't have to put any accidentals in to make that major scale work. It works because of the virtue of the placement of the pitches as they are. And there you can see that's where the half steps occur, right? Between the 3rd and 4th degree and the 7th and 8th degree. Now, if we go around the circle of fifths to the right, going clockwise, to the first letter, G, notice how it is associated with the number 1, meaning that we have 1 accidental, and since we're looking at the sharp side, that would be 1 sharp. Once again, there's C, no accidentals, right? C major, no flats, no sharps, but the key of G has 1 accidental, a sharp, and that happens to be F. It's in order to make the sequence of whole steps and half steps, that's what we need, that 1 sharp in there. So there we go. Once again, the half steps between 3 and 4 and the half steps between 7 and 8. And if we play this scale, that's what we get. If I take out that 1 sharp, it changes the color of the scale. Notice how we're not placing that accidental this time by the note itself. It's actually in the key signature. Okay, let's continue on around to the next one where we have 2 accidentals, and that would be F sharp and C sharp. And here we go. We have a major scale built on D instead of on G. We can continue on. There is the key of A major with 3 sharps. And the key of E major with 4 sharps. And the key of B major with 5 sharps. And then the key of F sharp major with 6 sharps. Okay, so it might look a little daunting, but it's actually pretty easy. Now I'm going to give you another tool to help you with construction, but we've looked at the sharp side of the scale. Let's zero everything out back to C major. Now let's go to the counterclockwise direction of our circle of fifths over to the first one, to the number 1, and we have the 1 flat, right, which is B. That gives us the F major scale. If we continue on to 2 flats, B flat and E flat, this gives us the B flat major scale. And we could continue on the 3 flats to the E flat major scale. And 4 flats, the A flat major scale. And 5 flats, the D flat major scale. Now, by the way, folks, I am making these scales fit within the 5 lines and 4 spaces, but I could have started on any note on the staff. I could have, for example, for D, I could have started on this D, or I could have started on D in the bass clef, but I'm trying to make it as easy to read and understand as possible. And then finally, 6 flats, G flat major. Okay, so there you go. There is the circle of fifths showing you the number of flats. I've got the scales there for you, but this doesn't tell you what notes are flat or what notes are to be sharped, okay? The circle does not tell you that. It just tells you the number that you have to use. So the next tool that we're going to take a look at is called the order of flats or the order of sharps. And so we're going to use that circle of fifths to construct a key signature. And let's take a look at this order. We have 7 letters in the order, B, E, A, D, G, C, and F. And we'll call this the order of flats. This is how this works. This is the order of the accidentals as they appear in that key signature. Now, let's pull up our trusty circle of fifths here, and let's take a look at the first flat key. Okay, so we're going to the left side of the circle, and the first flat key is F, and it only has 1 flat. Well, that 1 flat happens to be B. So that's where we would put our flat symbol for this particular key signature. And then we could put our 8 tones up there. And it works perfectly because this B flat, this 1 B flat, creates that half step sequence between the 3rd and 4th degree, and the 7th and 8th degree, by virtue of their placement, E and F already has the half step. Okay, let's move on to 2 flats. So now we need to include not only B, but E flat as well in our key signature. And we can move our scale up to B now. And then let's go on. Next one would be 3 flats. So we expand our flats to include A flat. We can move our flats now down to E flat. I could have gone up, but that's okay. This just makes it easier if I stay within the 5 lines and 4 spaces. Moving right along, 4 flats. I expand to include D flat now. And moving on to 5 flats, we expand to include G flat. Now we're in the key of D flat. And then let's move on to G flat, or 6 flats. So I include C flat in the mix. And we are now in the key of G flat. Notice how the wheel tells us what key we're in, right? By number, the number of the accidentals. 6 accidentals on the flat side would be the key of G flat major. And indeed, if we start our scale on G flat, that 2nd line of the treble staff, and we go up, we indeed have the key of G flat major. Okay, now we zero things back out to C, no flats or sharps. This time, let's talk about using this order to take a look at how this changes. Note how I went up to E flat in the key signature, right? That's the inclusion of that 2nd flat. Then we go down to A, to the key of E flat, right? And then we're going to go up to D flat. Notice how this arrows show you the direction that the flat signs go. And it shows you where we are on the circle as well as where the flats go. Now, yes, I could go to 7 flats. There is a key signature that has 7 flats in it. That would be the key of C flat major, but we're not going to worry about that today. We're just going to examine how these scales and key signatures are put together and how we can use the circle of fifths and order of sharps and flats to assist you in identifying and perhaps placing accidentals on your midterm exam. Now, this circle of fifths and order of flats and sharps is available to you on our e-learning site in the Useful Stuff module. So just take a look at it. You can print that off and keep it with you as you are taking your midterm. Okay, so let's now look at the order of sharps. And let's go to the first sharp, 1 sharp. And if we look at the order, the 1 sharp, the first sharp is going to be F sharp. So we would place a sharp on the top line. That would give us the half step and whole step sequence we need to create a G major scale. 2 sharps, notice how the sharps move differently or appear differently than the flats do. We went down to the C sharp, right, to include it. We have 2 sharps. We'll begin on D. That is where we are on the circle of fifths, right? 2 is associated with the letter D. 3 sharps. We go up to the G sharp. And that would be the key of A. And then 4 sharps, the key of E. 5 sharps, the key of B. And 6 sharps, the key of F sharp. So there you go. You have a wonderful view of how the circle of fifths and the order of sharps and flats work for you to identify and construct key signatures and place accidentals where they need to go. So I hope this has been helpful to you and that you'll be able to use it to prepare yourself for the midterm. We'll be talking to you soon, and good luck. And if you have any questions, as always, just shoot me an email. I'm a sentimental sap, that's all. What's the use of trying not to fall? I have no will, you've made your kill, 'cause you took advantage of me. I'm just like an apple on a bough, and you're gonna shake me down somehow. So what's the use? You've cooked my goose, 'cause you took advantage of me. I'm so hot and bothered that I don't know my elbow from my ear. I suffer something awful each time you go. It's much worse when you're near. Here am I with all my bridges burned, just a babe in arms where you're concerned. So lock the doors and call me yours, 'cause you took advantage of me.